All right, so let's talk about some offseason stuff. You've got a list here. I presume this is the draft list to a certain extent with the
for the most
teams.
part.
We'll just call it the list of teams in order of that they knew they weren't going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
All right. The Chicago Bears they're going to pick number one. Maybe. I have to start this off with just giving a huge shout out to Lovie Smith for just ramming it right up the Texans' ass after they told him they weren't going to fire him after the season. He went for two against the Colts. Instead of tying the game up, he went for two. He won the game, flip-flopped the Bears, and gave the Bears the number one pick. Texans went to second and beat the Colts. So not only gave them the fourth pick, but they're probably going to trade and leapfrog over the Texans and take the quarterback they want. And it just makes me really happy.
Yeah, I keep thinking about the same thing. Like the fact that the Colts very well could trade for that one pick and go above the Texans will be legendary, and it'll set their franchise back when they take Bryce Young instead of C.J. Stroud, and I can't wait for that.
Yeah. So I'm not a huge Lovie Smith fan, but big kudos, man. That's cojones. That's like, let me watch this. Let me see. I got one more parting gift for you. Absolutely love it. I know you're a big Eberflus fan, but they had an atrocious defense. I mean, the guy, so he gets a mulligan, right? I mean, it's his first year. So,
and they traded all his best players away.
Yeah, right. So I'm going to give the guy a mulligan. You still would expect the defensive coordinator to be able to at least be closer to mediocre, but they were like, I think they might be the worst. They might statistically be the worst defense in the league.
They were really bad. Yeah,
they're really, really bad. The cool thing is that even when they trade down, they're going to be able to get a really good defensive pick, which a lot of people are speculating either Jalen Carter from Georgia or Will Anderson Jr. from Alabama, which I think probably the Seahawks may take one of those if they don't take a quarterback, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But we should expect the Bears to go after some defensive players in the draft, maybe bring in some free agents, because you've got a defensive coordinator at the helm, and it seems to be a pretty good defensive coordinator. So they definitely need to tweak this because they got a franchise quarterback. So that's my thoughts on the Bears.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. You have to be able to rebuild that defense, but there are a lot of holes on that roster, right? That's how you get the number one pick, is by having a lot of holes on your football team. But at least for them, for right now, they don't have to worry about getting a quarterback. They have a quarterback on the cheap. He can run the ball and get 1,000 yards, and he's trying to learn how to throw the ball, and they can work with that. What they have to do now, there is talk about DeAndre Hopkins getting traded at some point this offseason from the Cardinals. The Bears would obviously be in line for that. Maybe that's how the Cardinals maybe trade up to that number one overall pick, is by trading away D-Hop in that situation. And because they got to get him more weapons. They went and got Chase Claypool during the season in 2022. So they just have to keep bringing in more weapons, get more guys around Darnell Mooney. You have to rebuild the offensive line for Justin Fields. It'll be better for him rushing the ball and passing the ball at that point. But it really starts with the defense. When you have a defensive coach and the way, he's trying to build that team, they have some good pieces in the secondary that they've drafted over the last two drafts, and they just have to rebuild that front. You know what I mean? They've traded a lot of guys away over the last 2 years from that defensive front. They've also lost guys to free agency in the last offseason. So they have to rebuild the front on both sides of the ball, and I think that's probably what Eberflus is going to be focusing on, and he would be wise to focus on. A lot of people, I guess more old school mentality is starting or building your football team starting up front. But it works. Like I feel like every team that makes it to the Super Bowl every year is good up front on both sides of the ball. So if you want to win, that's what they'll be focusing on. And this offseason is going to be huge when we're talking about Justin Fields' future. He's going into his third season. Whether or not he's going to stay with the Bears in the future is probably going to depend on how they build this team in the offseason. But they have easily the most cap room in the NFL. I'm pretty sure they're going to be over $100 million going into free agency this year. So there's a lot of room for them to make moves, and they have a lot of draft picks. I think they have 11 draft picks as of right now. And if they trade the number one pick, they'll have even more. So they can do a lot this offseason, but this is going to be a big one for them.
Yeah, and I think Bears fans should be aware not to expect much out of the Bears in the 2023 season. It's so bad. It's there could be a miracle. I mean, they could turn, but the division is top heavy. I mean, the Packers are probably going to resurge. The Vikings, dominated this year. The Lions are on the rise. There's just so many holes, as you pointed out, with this Bears team that they're probably going to get a good pick again next year. Maybe not number one, maybe not top 5, but it's gonna take 2 years to kind of put this back together for them to be a real contender for the division if they're headed that direction. Which I think Justin Fields, it's going to come down to, did they improve? Did they get him the things he needs to be successful? Did their record improve? Does he feel like they're headed in the right direction? Those kind of things, and then money also plays a big part in that as well. So a lot of things, to keep an eye on. But I don't expect people shouldn't expect the Bears to be an instant success with whatever happens with this draft. It's unlikely to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they draft well with the money that they have to spend, as long as they can draft well and fill holes, they could end up, near 500. But I think like even the best that they could do, probably 7 wins, probably a good cap for next season. At least that would be my early prediction.
Yeah, that sounds logical. I mean, we'll revisit that in 6 months before the season, and a lot of things could change. But that from where I'm sitting, that sounds like a good guess.